I mean, you become nutrient depleted under conditions of stress and illness, and we tend to be more.
How so?
So, excuse me.
I know that can kind of take us in a different direction, but I think it's a great question that a lot of people are probably thinking, like, I've never heard of that, so how so?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, there's so many different ways. I mean, if you're stressed out, then you have increased activity of either your innate or adaptive immune system. Those things require nutrients. Cortisol itself triggers the synthesis and the metabolism of different chemicals in the body, be those neurotransmitters or different hormones in the periphery. And all of these things require nutrients. All of these things require antioxidants, which can oxidize and then need to be reduced. And those require reducing agents, which require more nutrients. And then also,
would you say, Will, that a lot of that, so let's say kind of if stress is the mediating variable, it's the factor that's kind of causing the depletion of a lot of these things that you've mentioned, is it predominantly due, in your opinion, because of the massive amounts of inflammation that high stress or chronic stress causes that then wreaks havoc on the entire physiology?
Oh, certainly. I mean, inflammation by proxy it can cause and be exacerbated by increased glycolysis in different cells of the immune system, like macrophages. But inflammation itself can deplete almost every nutrient that I think that we could sit and list off here. Not only that, but inflammation is going to affect somebody's absorption capacity of nutrients that they're trying to take in. So, you can tie, I know it's a cliche saying, but you can pretty much tie inflammation back to the etiology of almost any condition that we can list off here. And I would say that probably in the society or the state of things that we live in today, then even considering low-grade inflammation, which can be caused by or a byproduct of so many things, just day-to-day stressors, then say cumulatively, like we don't tend to think about the impact that's having on our bodies over the course of a day to days to weeks. Like I think yesterday I was actually thinking about this. The day was, filled with so many small stressors that I remember thinking at the end of the day that I just felt completely exhausted and being like, I felt very high strung all day and I felt incredibly depleted. And I was like, man, like I eat as much as I normally do. I tend to eat pretty, say, a healthy diet. I think I get plenty of nutrients from various sources, but also realizing that the past couple of days had also been like that. And even though I had thought that I had gotten sufficient sleep as well, just every day with little stress here, little stress here, little stress here, you don't tend to think about the isolated incidents very much. But when you have one after the other, then those become cumulative and pretty much I guess you call it the allostatic load on the body increases. And it's just like adding bricks into a backpack and you just walking around and not paying attention to the added bricks. And then all of a sudden you're just like, wow, like this is really heavy. Like what's going on? You realize like, there's a lot of bricks back here. I should probably figure out ways to start unloading these.
Yeah, for sure. That's the key thing we do here at Hanu Health, right? Is we want to help people to become more self-aware of when they're experiencing their stress response, their autonomic nervous system going haywire, and then self-regulate it. And, we teach so many different means or ways of increasing kind of our adaptability as well as our resiliency to stress. And we focus a lot, on breath work, on exercise, on nutrition. But I think that one thing that, again, we get so many questions about, like, how can we optimize supplementation? And I know, it's funny because we were talking prior to recording about how, I will get emails. I can't even tell you how many emails that I've gotten over the past, maybe let's say 3 to 4 years about, should I be taking 5-HTP? Because I feel a little bit down. I'm a little depressed. And I heard somebody say that, this is probably a serotonin issue. And so therefore I must take 5-HTP. And they do it, not under me telling them them that they should, but they do it. And they're like, well, I don't feel anything, or I feel crummy, or I feel, you fill in the blank. And so there's just so many like myths here that I think we need to dispel. And so I think it's a great transition time for us to talk about that. So again, what are the role of, and we can either start with supplements, or we can start with kind of like one of the other things, maybe if we want to talk about like the ideology of things, is like, where do we start, number one, and like determining kind of like what we should do from a supplementation standpoint? Because you said, well, there can, be mineral depletion, I'm assuming, vitamin depletion, kind of all of these things that happen when we're experiencing these chronic states of stress, the sympathetic nervous system's amped up. So like, where do we even start with this? Do you have a recommendation? Like, do we need to get assessed for our mineral, levels, for our vitamin levels, and have that as a basis? Or can we just say, hey, supplement it up, like, let's go, 5-HTP, I'm depressed, said depressed, let me go get 5-HTP. Where's the starting place here?
Yeah, so, excuse me, I think that, and again, depending, I understand that depending on who you ask here, you could get, several different, and also wildly different answers, because there really is no right answer. So I think what I try to do is, now there's a lot of good answers, but the way that I try to look at these things is from a standpoint of practicality, because, excuse me, I have to try to think about this from the perspective of, I try to use my parents, because they're kind of like the typical consumer. Like, they're not, like, neither of my parents are obese or chronically ill, excuse me, but they're, I would call them part of the general population where they don't exercise very much. They don't like taking pills, which is actually, that is very, very consistent across the general population. You realize that if you start, if you're part of like producing a dietary supplement, if you're using a pills or tablets, adherence starts to go down dramatically after 2 pills, because people just hate taking pills. And like, so people like me, I'm like, I'll take, if I had to, I'll take 12 pills in one handful. Right. I don't care. But generally speaking, you have to look at it from the standpoint of the general consumer and people whose health may not be, I would say, consider like as good as mine, because like I'm fortunate enough to be knowledgeable about several things in Sarah. So like, I do the best I can with exercise. I do the best I can with my sleep, even though these things aren't optimal at all times. They certainly aren't, because life is a thing. But, I try to meditate as frequently as I can. My nutrition's on point. I think I have my supplementation on point. And so not everybody is me, and certainly not everybody is you. So the best, the best way to look at this is through the lens of the typical American who does not have sufficient knowledge to be optimal in all cases. And so I think practicality is the best thing to do. And so with that being said, like, sure, you can go get like you can go get like a vitamin panel done, and you can go get gene testing done, and those are kind of all like, but some people can't even afford that, and some people's insurance will cover it. And even then, you know that a lot of times when looking at different vitamins and blood levels, that may not be indicative of a deficiency or adequacy or your usefulness. Exactly. Now, it can be one thing used with several other things to come up with a possibility of what's happening, in somebody's body. But most people just aren't going to take that route. So what do you do? Right. And so I think what you have to do is look at some of the molecules that are absolutely necessary for human health and to sustain life. And then we can talk about things.
Yeah, what are those?
So we can talk about things as general, as general as protein, which I know that that's kind of a topic that's like beaten like a dead horse, like at least in our circles. Yeah.
But it's not sexy anymore, right? It used to be like, oh yeah, let's talk about protein. That's sexy. Now people are like, nah, let's get over the other stuff. But it's such a like low-hanging fruit for everybody.
I mean, excuse me, I can't stop this cough. So I'm sitting here talking about how healthy I am, and my lungs are about to come out of my throat. But I mean, if you're not getting in enough protein, then vitamin A, cysteine, vitamin B vitamins, vitamin E, vitamin C, all of those deficiencies can ensue from not getting enough protein. You're like, well, that's odd because protein is protein and may not contain many vitamins within the material of the protein and be like, well, if you're not, getting enough cysteine, then that's the rate limiting enzyme or the rate limiting substrate, for glutathione synthesis. And if you don't have enough glutathione, then you're not able to adequately reduce oxidized vitamin C back into its usable antioxidant form. Now you have a vitamin C deficiency, which would also exacerbate a glutathione deficiency because vitamin C is also used to reduce recycled glutathione. So you just see the cascade of events that can happen from not getting enough protein in your diet.
Yeah. Then the person would let's say they get a panel and they say, oh, wait, I'm vitamin C deficient because of the pathway you just told me about. It didn't start there. It started somewhere else that then led to a depletion or, the degradation of vitamin C levels. But then people will be like, oh, and especially in the functional medicine world, it's like vitamin C is deficient, so therefore let me just take a vitamin C supplement. Is that the right route, or are we missing something and should go back to the starting place?
Now, I think that this plays into the totality of the answer I was going to give to this, is looking at all of the things that are necessary for human health. And I think that also the important thing to be mindful of here is that we need to be honest with ourselves. And when I say that, what I mean is that let's look at the actual pillars of human health being nutrition, sleep, exercise. You can throw in meditation, although it's not necessary for survival. I don't think anybody would argue that, doing it is not helpful in some way or can be. So assuming that you're honest with yourself, and all these things, I'm doing the best I can with my nutrition, I'm doing the best with my sleep. And when I say being honest, I don't mean it's well, I go to bed at 11:30 every night and I got to get up at 5 a.m. for work. I'm doing the best I can to fall asleep. But you get home from work and then you take care of all your duties and you make dinner and you clean up and then you sit on the couch.
Watch Netflix for 3 hours.
You sit on the couch from 9 p.m. to 11:30 and watch Netflix. Are you really being honest with yourself that you're doing the best you can for your sleep? So if you actually make sure you're getting enough protein, you're getting enough, healthy fats in your diet, and you're also getting enough basically total energy. You're getting enough sleep. Maybe you're meditating here and there. That one you can kind of put on the table or leave it off or whatever. But you're exercising frequently, but not so frequently that you're kind of burning yourself out. Then if you can honestly say, yes, I'm doing the best I can. Now, also I understand that life happens and some people have babies. They might have a sleep condition, so they may not under their normal conditions be able to optimize something like sleep. But now we can look at supplementation, because it's called supplementation and not substitution for a reason.
Yeah.
We're not going to substitute supplements for sleep, right? Now supplements can help to plug holes when situations without them are not what we would call optimized. So if somebody does have a condition that's not allowing them to get enough deep sleep or a long duration of sleep, or they do have a newborn, then they may need to take some supplements that help them get to sleep a little bit faster, or maybe help them get the most out of the sleep they are getting. But I do think that when we look at where do we start, now again, you have your bases covered and you think I'm doing the best I can in these areas, so I shouldn't have I shouldn't be protein deficient, or I'm getting enough healthy fats, so on and so forth. Then you look at the vitamins and the minerals that are necessary to sustain human life and for biological processes. You don't have to get super nuanced and be I'm going to start taking all these cognitive enhancers, and I'm going to start taking these really cool herbs that I heard affect your physiology like this. But why don't there's nothing wrong with those things. But before we get, all complicated, let's look at the things that are necessary for biological function.
Thanks for listening to the Hanu Health Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. This podcast would not happen without listeners and supporters like you, and the best way to support us and the show is to head on over to iTunes and provide us with a 5-star review. This helps us reach others and spread the good word of breathing and stress resiliency. If we read your 5-star review on air, please reach out to podcast@hanuhealth.com with your name and mailing address, and we will send you some sweet Hanu gear. Until next time, breathe better and stress less.